just yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual town meeting. We'd like to see some of the people. Can I remind everybody, this is not an East Grinstead town meeting. This is not an East Grinstead town council meeting. This is an East Grinstead town meeting. The annual town meeting is something that was taking place before councils started in East Grinstead, before the Urban District Council and before the Town Council. So the annual town meeting is when the town comes together to look at things to do with the town and to consider things for the town, to look at progress. The only reason I'm up here wearing my very difficult thing to swim in medal is because I'm a town mayor. So, without any further ado, we have got a speaker later on, we hope, and he's going to be talking about planning. But I want to say a little bit about that before he comes, before it starts, so it's very good. So, we need to receive and consider the minutes of last year's town meeting. Then I have, has everybody had a chance to have a look at last year's town meeting minutes? In which case, can I have I'm going to propose that we accept them. Can I absolutely just second them? Bless you. Can I absolutely second the town? Thank you very much, guys. For, I think it's bless you. And can we put them to a vote, please? Thank you very much indeed. That's great. I'm going to run through this agenda, which the town clerk's very carefully put together for me. Well, that's the 2021s. And we need to consider those who are with us tonight who have sent in their apologies. Do apologise. We have apologies this evening from Councillor Webster. And we have apologies from Councillor Liz Bennett, from Councillor Helen Farr, who's put her back out, so thoughts and prayers with her tonight, and also from Mr. Baldwin, James Baldwin, apologies from him. We have we've dealt with it, so I'm going to press on and look at the things that the town has done over the last year. Note from our lovely town clerk, we have to vacate by 7:30 tonight, so we're going to really get our steps on, okay. I'd like to start with referring to the budget book and annual report this year. Having had the unprecedented years of 20 and 21 with lockdowns, we have returned to our offices and council meetings, but still have to be mindful that this virus has not gone away. Welcome. Yes, so that's great. That this virus has not gone away, but hopefully will be manageable. That's what we're doing so far. Apparently, we're faring a lot better than other nations throughout the world. Our buildings, while close to the community corridors, were able to be utilised by the Alliance for Better Carers Vaccination Centre between January and July 21. This allowed cohorts 1 to 9 to have their vaccinations locally, while we had to end our use in July once weddings returned to each court. Of course, that's a very important thing that we use this for weddings. We were pleased to see that the vaccination centre popped up a few places and found temporary home in Queen's Walk for those receiving boosters. I have mine down there. I'm sure some of you did too. We don't know yet about the fourth vaccination, which has been muted, but that is a possibility. But once we told we use our channels of communication to help share news. This is what we always do for the town council does. We held our mayor meeting in May 21, and I was delighted to be re-elected as town mayor with a hope of a year of events somewhat more, as my predecessors experienced. We've got Danny here, bless him, terrific mayor. He did an extra 6 months, and I took over from him and did an extra 6 months, and then we led into this current year. And then in May we'll have a proper mayor meeting, and Adam, who's currently my deputy, will hopefully be voted in, and we'll take over from there. I've been greatly honoured to see events return invitations to attend. I tend to look forward to, be honoured to, and inspired to go to events for our town. And I know that previous mayors have had that experience. I don't tend to go to the things outside the town, which are sort of like luxury items, if you will. But I've been absolutely touched and inspired to go along to various things throughout this last year with a lot of our own people. I was delighted to see not just the Royal British Legion, but also youngsters from the uniform youth carrying their standards in the procession at the recent last year's remembrance service. The four committees of the council worked hard this last year, and I know that they are there to answer any questions that you might have later on. Planning under Councillor Visser have considered large and small scale developments from extensions to 40+ dwelling sites. They have made their robust recommendations to the district and developers when need be. It's important to note that we have a neighbourhood plan in place, and because of that, that informs the district plan, which as I will be talking about later on, and that's an important thing that we construct and put forward in the neighbourhood plan. Public services under Councillor Woodgate have challenged our police force to provide a greater presence in the town, submitted responses to consultations on Gatwick expansion. I can also tell you that I've had a dialogue with Katie Hall, our police and crime commissioner, and she's looking to come down here. It's one of the particular things that concerns people of our town, the policing of our town. She's looking to come down here, or come up here basically, to talk to us more about that, where the police station should be, and indeed the numbers of police. I know that one of the problems has been that over the years, funding for the police has gone down, and she has had to make what disposals she can. But we're really looking to see that situation improve, and I know the council will be highly involved in that. Highways development have worked with the Cycle Forum and principal councils to bring forward the local cycling and walking implementation plan for the town. The committee are also following the developments of the Queen Victoria Hospital as it determines its future. I know that that's something that's very, very close to all of our hearts and Grinstead. The world-class centre that is the QVA, we don't see that loss. We want to see it continue to develop, but everything has to go through a period of change, as we all know. The team have worked with the new community and tourism manager as she takes the first steps to encourage footfall back into the high street and the government's Welcome Back programme. The Love East Grinstead event was a great success. Now, one of the things that I've noted over this last year is the amount of rain. We had the lovely, what's it called? Not the ass, not the mule, the donkey derby. We had the donkey derby last year with the lovely lions. Put that forward, and I've never seen so much rain. We've all got pretty soaked at that. But you know what? People came and people enjoyed it. That's what this town's all about. At the following one East Court Live that we managed to have, it chucked it down. Our people came from all around, and they were determined to have fun. That's what makes this town what it is. And this recent Love East Grinstead event, again, we had a fair bit of rain, but we were there, and we made sure that people made sure that they came along and we supported it, and it was a great event. I'm just hoping that the May Day celebration is not just the same for the we've had enough rain, I think, at the moment. So thank you, Paul. Amenities and tourism under Councillor Mrs. Farron. Again, thoughts and questions I think we should really have heard about. Develop the town's jubilee commemorations, oversee the return of East Court Live, continued with the beautification of town, council and part of the East Court estate, and new facilities at the play park. And I know that we have Jubilee tonight, who's one of our councillors, who's very involved with East Grinstead and Blue, and we're very, very grateful to you for that. It's a very important one right now. They have also made less powerful but needed decisions to change for use of the lower terrace for organised groups and barrier off part of the car park to ensure that tenants, councillors and staff are able to park on the estate. This can obviously be often be a problem. The committee continue with a movement towards electric vehicles and equipment, however you might feel about that. And the works to rid Queen's Road Cemetery of badges. Sorry about that, Councillor Matthews. To allow the area to be open to the public again. Finance and general purposes, following review of governance procedures, the council continues to have good stewardship of council resources and procedures, and once again received an unqualified audit. The committee oversaw the issuing of grants to various community groups and charities, including specific grants for youth sport initiatives. I thank them all for the work they've done, ably supported by and I shan't take any questions now, but we'll invite any questions later on after we've listened to Councillor Salter. Before he comes on, by way of an introduction, I've already said that there are certain things that are very important to our town. People want to come out at night and to get together. We saw this, with the closures last year with the lights. We saw this at Christmas time when we turned on the Christmas lights. So many people came and were speaking to me particularly and saying, we love when the town section's closed, so we can all get together. Let's do this more often. And visitors to the town saying the same thing. It is great. And what your town council are looking at the moment with the assistance of an economic development plan is to look at the possibility of some sort of pedestrianisation of parts of the town. We don't know exactly what that's going to be, but that's the sort of thing that people are saying. And a large part of what's happened during the pandemic has been the sort of alfresco dining that's been going on. That will probably evolve, change, but it's something that people want and enjoy. Because as I've already said, the important thing that people are very concerned about is the policing around town. And we tend to carry on talking, opening that dialogue, making sure it happens. But one of the most new points is planning. And planning is to do with building, but very necessary building. And I'd like to explain that a little bit if I may, and if you can just listen to this sort of story I'm going to tell you, I'm sure it will help you a little bit. Last year, I was looking on Facebook, I suppose, for many options Facebook. And I do apologise to those who've heard this story before. But on Facebook, there was a competition. There was this lady, she put on there, if you can go anywhere you like, if you could go anywhere you like in the world, and you had the finances to do it, and the application to be able to do it, where would you go? And people were putting on their Maldives, they were putting on their Spain, France, Italy, all sorts of places like that. And I said, 1966. And a friend of mine came back and he said, 1966. I said, all right, then 1967. He said, what do you mean? The fact is, I was 16 in 1966. And if you look at old films of that time, particularly the old carry-on films, you'll see neighbourhoods, you'll see streets. And on those streets, there are a hell of a lot less cars. At that time, we had hospitals, new hospitals that were being built to accommodate people that needed medical treatment. We had police on the beat. But if you look at those neighbourhoods, new neighbourhoods with here and there with one or two cars. Today, those same places which have been rehabilitated have got 3 or 4 cars each. And streets, villages are absolutely rammed with cars. Now, the reason for this is simple. In 1966, the world had achieved what might be considered a perfect number of population. It was able to sustain itself within that. 10 years later, that population had doubled. And a few years later, it had doubled again. So from the beginning of the world to 1966, the population of the world had achieved a certain number. By 10 years, 15 years later, it had doubled, and it's carried on doing it. Now, the only way that we are going to have the housing that's very necessarily needed to put those people into is to have a building program. That building program is something that causes such contention throughout the parties and from the government. We have to build. But if we have, as I'm sure yes, example, if we have a plan, then we can decide and have some say in where that housing is built. And if we don't, then the developers have free rein to do so. We want to see our town evolve, but we don't want to see it quick over. And that is the same for every place else in the country. If we fail to plan, then we plan to fail. It's as simple as that. Give the developers the opportunity to just do it. And I know that our colleagues in Mid-Sussex work very, very hard to prudently look where that will take place. So all of us should not be sort of turning around to them and saying that they're some sort of maniacs that just want to throw it out somewhere. It's not true. Councillor Salisbury, I know that's it. Thanks for coming.
Way of raising this up. Whenever I see one of these, is that all right? Yeah. Whenever I see one of these microphones, I tend to take my shirt off, grab it, and do a Freddie Mercury. It's very difficult talking to a group of people about planning because this afternoon I was having to respond to some of the documentation from officers, and I have 5 bookcases of planning documents produced by the planning in my state. And the amount of paper that comes out is just unbelievable, going through all of the detail of how you put things together. So I don't know amongst those 5 bookcases which bits you're interested in. So someone could give me a clue. What do you want to talk about tonight? So,
as Chair of Planning, I want to voice one of the major concerns, which is which is kind of addressed by our analysts, burden which will place on our town development, where this is having a very clear negative effect on the burdens. Although having more developments could be seen as preferable, because it can't cope with traffic without substantial improvement in its infrastructure. So we're very interested to know from a higher level what we can do to defend our town from overdevelopment that will impact traffic and affect those lives of those who live.
okay, thank you. That's great. And indeed, traffic. It's lovely to see Edward Matthews here. I work together a lot.
Can I ask you to paraphrase that question into the microphone? So I should think the mic picked up by Councillor. You could paraphrase what's been said before.
Okay, he wants to know more about how to control development so that the infrastructure. Edward used to talk to me a lot about the East Grinstead bypass. And the fact that it was rejected because of the depth of housing that had been required to provide it. And the reason I was slightly late tonight, I'm sorry, is the big reason is because the money's still fighting just So I'll deal with that in a moment. So there's one over here.
Yeah, could you talk about the need to increase rather, affordability, and how to stop the NIMBYs that are so prevalent in this town?
Right, okay. Affordability. Shall I deal with those two to start with, and then we can come back to some more questions? Right. Wow. How do you control development in a town and the infrastructure? The only way you can control development and get infrastructure is, as John mentioned, is having a plan. Because otherwise, the developers can develop where they want to, because the national planning policy framework requires you to assume sustainable development if you don't have a plan that has placed allocations. If you have allocations, one of the things you need, this is the bad news, because what I'm talking about is unpalatable, but the worst of it is totally unacceptable, which is not having a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, as I say, developers can come and start developing if they can show, particularly that you don't have a 5-year housing management plan. Come and do, and therefore bring control. Once you start having a plan, you then get a plethora of landowners coming forward. Some with small sites, as small as 8 or 10 houses, some with much bigger sites, some with massive sites. But what you're trying to do is you want infrastructure. And the only way you get infrastructure is with the larger sites, because that's the only way the development can forward. So if you want schools, you want your roads improved around the site, because you're not allowed to take the money from the site and use it to repair the infrastructure failures in the past. That has to be new money from somewhere else. So how do you deal with that? Smaller sites are going to give you a difficulty in getting schools, doctors' surgeries, and that sort of thing. I'm sure you've seen this when you've been looking at plans in East Grinstead. Because all they have to do is give you a contribution. You've then got to find the land, you've got to put all the contributions together to fund whatever it is you're looking for, hospital or whatever. If you have big sites tend to be at the very base level 500, preferably 1,000, preferably more than 1,000, 1,500, something like that. You can get the developer to, on that site, put in the infrastructure requirements you require, like the schools and so on. It's not a palatable idea, though, but you have to give up a huge swathe of greenfield land to put those houses in to get the development you need. So it's always a juggling act. The district plan we're running at the moment, because we couldn't show exactly the numbers the inspector was looking for, and we ended up having to do what they call a SAST DPD document. He said, okay, you're 2,000 houses short, go and show me where they're going to be, and then what way you've got to do it for the next 18 months. So we are waiting now for him. We've done that work, and we're waiting for him to come back. But of course, part of that is affecting the East Grinstead area, because you do have 2 sites here, which I know are causing problems on the road structure. So yes, you have a plan, but it's never going to be easy to put that plan in place. And those 2 sites, which I suppose people here are mainly interested in, of course, it is facts. Those 2 sites have no evidence that show that they themselves affect the road network. Now, I know that that's not a message people want to hear, because you know you've got a problem with the road network with the H2 and the H2. That, though, is being dealt with in a different way, because you can't blame sites where there's no evidence that they are imposing on the road network on those junctions that you're concerned about. It never is 1,000 cars. Now, this is another 500. This is another difficult thing. I didn't believe what are called tricks. Okay? You've all heard of tricks. It's the way that the highways people measure the movements in and out of the estates. And one estate, I was so paranoid about that they got numbers. Navel-gazing enough to go and get a school at 7 o'clock in the morning, go and sit outside the entrance to the site and count the cars cars going in and out of Russia. I did the same thing in the afternoon. You know, within 2 or 3 cars there was spotting. It wasn't anything like the movements that your professionals that would be get. So how are you going to deal with traffic in East Grinstead? I think it's going to be a major nightmare, and it's just going to get worse over the next short period. Before we managed to persuade the government to look seriously at traffic. All this house coming through Forest Road tonight. And that's just a tiny little community with a crossroads. How you get people to put money in for that is only by getting money from the developers that are in that area to try and change. I don't really want to give you a question.
No, they're not, unfortunately, and explained by the answer, to be honest. Feels increasingly like the problem gets passed from one person when it's not happening. Developers will not going to have that many cars, not going to have that many impact on that, and come down the line, And all the time, we just have to wait longer for a solution, which until it's come before we have to take a vote on more houses.
The solution is everybody gets rid of some cars.
But we know that that's not really going to happen.
Exactly.
So we live in the real world, not a made up world.
I live in a tiny close, and in that tiny close, each of the houses has at least 3 and some 4 cars. I can't tell them not to own those cars.
But therefore the district and the council will know that if you build 550, 700, build both sides down there, then there are likely to be 1,000+ cars.
Parked, but not necessarily moving. Yeah. No, I know your frustration because I've been through this
on an hour we've already over capacity.
Yeah.
And I feel that we as a town council and as a planning committee make a lot of noise when we see through all the policies and do to get told that we're being annoying or talking out of turn. But actually, I feel that we should be speaking on behalf of the people that write to us in large numbers with their concerns on this. And what's frustrating is trying to get district accountants and everyone knows there's a problem, but nobody wants to take responsibility to do anything about it. And that feels very frustrating. And then to have more houses put on that, and I had a meeting with the developers the other day for SO20, and you know, there's a new school, medical facility, school facilities, very nice, low hanging fruit, but nothing really to address the huge problem that there is right on that doorstep of that site, and that site is going to contribute massively. And nobody wants to answer the question, no one wants to put their hand up and take responsibility for it.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I know you do.
Yeah. There's hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people that feel that.
What you have to,
somebody has to down the line take responsibility for that.
Well, the responsibility is set out because to review the traffic going in and out of one of those sites. West Sussex Highways will have done very detailed traffic study on its impact on the junctions around. But the issue is, I mean, it's like having a glass of water, which is virtually full, and then you put a bit of orange squash on top of it. That's the way they have put that out. And I can say that on the site's DPD document, which is with the inspector at the moment, you probably followed the path of that going through. He has not put back any main modifications on that site, so he has accepted the West Sussex Highways review of the traffic movements around there against those junctions that you're concerned about, because he accepts that it's a broader issue than those sites. It's actually a major transport issue, which Sussex and Surrey county councils are working with Cambridge and Mid Sussex on trying to resolve. It isn't going to be resolved around 2 sites.
Especially we have to more houses and something more.
Well,
it's so unfortunately I don't lose a meeting. I've got to go to my wife up from 3 British because there are no trains. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm sorry I can't give you anything more positive. I'll tell you what, having a plan will actually dampen it down.
No, it's going to make it worse. But thank you.
Sorry?
Keep going with the housing, build more housing.
Build more houses. Well, there are people. I actually attended a meeting in Grinstead some years ago, where the community there was really dead set against 12 houses being built in the middle of the community, and the whole village turned out to say they didn't want it. And you know, I mean, for Grinstead, it's the equivalent of a big group of housing you put into East Grinstead, because they're a tiny little village, only 700 people there. So they want to put in these houses, and everybody said, no, we don't want our very disruptive and the rest of it. Sitting in the middle of the group was a young couple that were just going to get married, and they had spoken to me beforehand and said that they wanted to live in Grinstead and they couldn't afford it. So my response to the residents when they said, you know, you've got to stop this and the rest of it, I just pointed at this couple and said, you tell them why they can't live in Grinstead. And that's a real factor. Affordability was the thing that was mentioned. One of the problems with Mid Sussex is it's too damn popular. And we get commuters, and the commuters are high earners, they can earn a lot. One of the ideas that you can build, you know, a lot of low-cost housing, that's going to solve the problem, is not the answer. Because A, you won't get developers to do it, they're not going to build something when they can see an opportunity elsewhere. So, you know, in terms of size. And secondly, the low-cost housing isn't low cost when you build it in Sussex, because the developers pay too much for the land in the first place. So trying to drive down affordability by build is not the answer.
There are some rumblings that I'm hearing back from people who don't necessarily want to go on the microphone. And they're saying things such as we need more school places and we need more infrastructure, such as doctors and things like that. So can you explain a little bit about how they get provided and what can be done if there isn't enough money coming through, when clearly we are seeing the schools, for example, the school route being more overcrowded for children?
Yeah, you only get infrastructure these days. You only get schools and doctor surgeries if you get the section 106, which is the bit in the town that covers how you get money. If you can get that in, you only get it by building houses, unfortunately, unless the government sees a strategic opportunity and will put something in because they believe in it. Now, I just opened a social housing building a couple of weeks ago. And there are 3 levels of housing. There's market housing, there's affordable housing, and there's social housing. And the difference is that market housing, you make the money. Affordable housing is 80% of whatever the market housing is. Social housing is only 60%. So how do you get it down to 60%? Somebody has to put the money in. That's the only way you get that kind of infrastructure. And the people who put money in this case, whether it's England, they thought that it was a really good opportunity, so they supported it and put it into to gain that bit of infrastructure for us. In terms of doctor surgeries, everybody's going on about doctor surgeries at the moment because out of the pandemic, it's a big issue, isn't it? We can get the buildings built. What we can't do is put the GPs in it, and that's an issue around here. So we have at Town Cross, there's a big medical centre that was built, which even I think has 2 small operating theatres in it for just sort of minor stuff. And it's got 1 GP in there operating. You know, we think, well, why? You've got this big centre. And you can't actually, you've got to get the local commissioning group, which is what they call the control GPs in the area. You've got to get them to support you putting a GP surgery in. Because all GP surgeries these days are private businesses. Very difficult to do unless they can see they can run the business properly. In terms of schools, again, you're in a position where you have to identify where there's a need, and then you have to, in the area, you have to have enough development to be able to pay for it. Unless West Sussex thinks that they're going to have to do something because the numbers are going up and there isn't any development going on. That's pure forestry.
So that young couple that you pointed at, that young couple's got no school, no doctor surgery, they can't drive anywhere, and there's no need for jobs. I'm saying, I know that we're not going to agree, and you're just going to say what you're going to say, but it doesn't make common sense to anybody that's living in East Grinstead or surrounding areas, what you're saying. You can't, the schools that they want the people to go in from SA 19, is it, or is it 20, it's the one next to us? 19, is in Surrey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the answer, yeah. And it's,
No,
it's
the
full
answer
up.
isn't, no.
So you're going to build, and
exactly what
actually, the developers can provide, give you the land and say the school's going to be built there. There are no guarantees that that school will be built. I lived in West Sussex on Maidenbow. We took years and years and years and years and years to get schools or any infrastructure built there. It was a nightmare. Something like there were thousands of houses there. You know, you're not convincing anybody. Nobody's convinced. You know, I'm a member of the public. I'm not part of the town council. We've got thousands of people that come to us and say, what's going on? We're not listened to. So you can say everything you're going to say tonight. I'm sorry, because I am quite angry to hear all of this, because it just doesn't change anything. We all sit here, and you say it's nothing changes. And when Fraser's gone off, we couldn't get here tonight. I live 2 miles away. It took 25 minutes to get into the car park. Now, we're not anti-building, but it's just got to be with some common sense.
No, and I understand.
You know, so how are these people, like doctor's surgeries, are impossible to get into around here? Everybody's complaining. It's not about COVID. That's an excuse. That's an excuse. You've sat and encountered traffic going into places. We sit in the traffic every single day when we go out in these streets. Local businesses, and I've walked around local businesses in the last year, they're not listened to. Nobody's listened to. But we do have a great town. We do have a great town. We want it to carry on being great. Sorry, I'm going to stop now because I'm just so angry. I was just angry.
No, I mean, I
because it's just frustrated.
you're entitled to be angry
Yeah,
and frustrated, and I fully understand that. The issue is we can't deal with something overnight that has gone wrong over years.
Yes,
And that's a
but
fact.
where's the money gone? S106 hasn't been spent where it's not been put into it. You all know this, you all talk, you all know it, you all know that it is just words and no actions.
No, the S106 always goes in the local area of.
Does it?
It does.
Does it come down to the bit of West Sussex in Felbridge that I live in, and I'm in the East Grinstead bit of Felbridge? It doesn't come down there at all. Nothing's shared out down there.
Well, it's always specified. That's the issue. I'm sorry you're frustrated about it, but when S106 is put together, it's put together by mainly the county council, because they will allocate so much to a school. So, all right, I'm not going to persuade you, Madeline. I'm sorry about that.
Well, if you excuse me, if I may stand up. When we're talking about S106s, I'll give you a classic example, and the town clerk was with me. We was up at King George's Centre, King George's Field, moving the beacon. No, just had to move it from here. One of the officers from Parks Department was up there, before speaking supervising the removal. Now, as councillors, this is not Robert's fault. We all share your concerns, because we're frustrated as much as you are, but we're banging our heads against that brick wall, so we are constantly trying. Anyway, going back to talking to the officer, we wanted play park refurbished. I think there's plans to refurbish that. And I said, well, why can't you extend it down there and have something like a, what do you call it, BMX track or whatever you want to call it? Do you know what he turned around and said to me? You haven't got enough S106 money. And I said, oh, can't we have something Burgess Hill then? He said, no, because they've taken all the development. I'm sorry, I just wanted to actually try and clarify that. I hope that helps.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is an issue that the money has to be spent where it is. I mean, you've got Councillor Gibson sitting next to you, who, regularly tells me that Crawley Down is devoid of any place. But it has to go with where development is, and it has to go where it's specified in the legal agreement before the development is done. Sorry, moving on.
Can I just yeah. One of the things that can be provided, but I know that we'll share your concerns about all of the things One of the things that can provide is maybe a surgery. What we can't provide is the doctor. There is a worldwide shortage of doctors, a worldwide shortage. There's also a worldwide shortage of nurses. We make incredible demands on our nurses to have degrees nowadays before they can become a nurse. We're taking nurses from the nether parts of the world because we haven't got enough. We're accepting them on face value. That's the sort of problem we've got. To do with the roads and things like that, there was a previous administration in this town that set out a plan to put a ring road around East Grinstead, and it would have been funded out of line. That out of building. That administration was hounded because of what they tried to do. And as things have moved forward, I've got one of the guys sat here. And as things have moved forward, there is now very little scope for anybody to be able to put any sort of ring road. When I came out of the Navy in '74, the M25 was just nearing completion, and it was looking back at the traffic of 1966, and the M23 was just being completed, so you go down to Gatwick, off the M25 down the M23, you know what I mean? And that again was looking backwards at the traffic that used to be in 1966. Both of those roads now, large parts of that, finish up as car parks. Now these are the sort of problems that in planning for a world population that's going manic all the time on sort of, I understand where you come from in terms of school. My daughter is head teacher. So one of the things that you can't is manufacture out of thin air head teachers and teachers. We are with you on this. Don't think that we're not. But the people have to have them. There are people who will say, not building it here, we don't want it here. And other people will say, my kid's got us somewhere to live. So there is an argument on both sides. I hope that's helpful. I know that the council
Thank you, Rob, for coming tonight. I would say that very honestly, that they represent a very big residential building construction first. From Westminster, only in North Westminster. Two technical points. No surprise you and I have been discussing this over the last 2 months. To do with traffic, and it's the last issue for traffic to raise. The 4 local authorities, 2 district councils, Cambridge, Mid Sussex, 2 county councils, Surrey and West Sussex, corporately commissioned WSP Transport Board, which is an overall strategic, overarching transport board covering South Surrey and West Sussex and the 4 areas. Now that report is probably £250,000 transport report, possibly more, and it's been sat on by all 4 authorities. The report's ready to go, but it hasn't been released. Now, that is, if it's not going to be released, can you please say it's not going to be released? Because these guys have done FOIs for up to 2 weeks on it. I've been asking about it. Nobody's been given any concrete assurances that it will be released. Now, if it's not going to be released, that will be a public scandal. So we need to bottom that. Second point is, we're well aware of the Surrey consultation response to their letter on the 24th of January, which you've seen, and I forwarded it again to you, and I've asked questions to the council. They're saying basically that junction there needs to be a solution found between all 4 local authorities as a condition, most, that SN19 and 20 are granted permission if they get approved through the councillors, through the inspectors' final report. So those are 2 technical points. These guys are 2 bodies that kind of ask that, but they know a lot more about planning than I do. They spend a lot of time on it. We liaise very closely as a town council with this group and other residents groups, and council groups involved as well. So even if you can't answer those 2 technical points tonight, they are very important to the town council and certainly the residents.
Yeah, thanks, Rex. I mean, I'm aware of that report, and there has been an executive summary of it released. What we won't do is no one will sign off on the actual report itself, because everybody keeps saying there's a bit more work that needs doing here and a bit more work that needs doing there. What I will do is I will take something away from tonight, because I I only became aware that nobody was signing off on that as I was looking at what the issues were around this Grinstead market tonight. And I will go and have a stir pot on that, because it is quite unfair, I think, a major highways issue, which is causing all sorts of problems in your town, and people are not moving forward on it. At some stage, somebody does have to take responsibility for a report that has already been written. And if there is more work that needs to be done, I would ask the question, which package of work is it? Is it in train? And if not, why? I'll go away and ask that question. So,
One on the subject of the WSP report, I fully understand why it's not because there are third-party land issues, which might cause vehicles. That doesn't really explain why in Sussex deemed the report irrelevant when looking at the traffic situation for the DPP, because the WSP report showed a much worse congestion situation than the sister report that the council relied on. It does seem to be quite scandalous that they would almost ignore the more material evidence for that specific junction. I think that, being rather cynical, the council is doing everything they can to separate the allocation of those sites from the traffic. As you yourself have said, it's not the traffic from those two sites that's causing the problem. The problem already exists. That I think is probably a well-known fact. It's just that it is already severe at that junction, and what I think the council don't want to do is make them contingent. I think Surrey Highway is called a granting condition. Most people would just make it a contingent condition, because West Sussex, in their consultation and report for the DPP, made it clear that they felt that we should acknowledge that a solution may not be possible for that junction. So if all those things were taken into account, it made it very difficult for the officers and the DPP. So that's why I can't understand why the WSP report was deemed irrelevant.
I'm not familiar with anyone saying it was irrelevant.
It's in the section 22 consultation report for the submission document.
Okay, thank you. I do have to say that, you can say, well, I'm just dodging the issue here. That's all I can do. We are not a highways authority. We have to rely on the highways. I took a risk a while ago with Hillcrest Farm. Okay, at the time, I was chairman of the district planning committee. And West Sussex Highways had said that that was an acceptable development, regardless of the, as far as I was concerned, what was going on at that. Mr. Peacock had run at his own expense a separate transport study. And I was so impressed with it that we don't normally allow third-party studies to be taken into view because, according to the way things are laid out, West Sussex Highways is our statutory consultancy on highways. However, I took the Peacock report and I said it was unacceptable. We refused the application. We got taken to the cleaners from the planning inspector, who said we had got expert advice from our statutory consultees. So they not only got the site, and we got all the costs against us as well. So, we do have to acknowledge that we have statutory consultees we have to not necessarily abide by, but we have to be very cautious about going against their advice. And I mention that because on top of what West Sussex tells us about sites, whether it's those two you're talking about or others, those sites were in the DPD document when it went through examination with the inspector. In October, we got back the major modifications from the inspector, and he said nothing about it at all. Now, he got all the information about it. And as a district council, we can do nothing about that. We still haven't had his final letter yet to say he approves or disapproves it of the district planning document. But we're expecting it short for 4 months. And we don't see that there are any major modifications that he's going to require. After that, we have, we can complain as much as you can and say, actually, this doesn't seem right. All we can do is push for the overarching highways issue, which is between Surrey and Sussex County Council. And I will go away and I will have a really hard stir at why we're not getting some answers on that. That's all I can say. Sorry about that. John.
Thanks, Robert. I'm not quite sure if there's questions or comments, but I appreciate the comments that you've just given. I think that it's a bit more hope for people, just that we will get to where we need to get to from a traffic perspective. I think from my so I'm a town councillor, but I'm also newly appointed deputy leader for Mid Sussex. And I understand all the work that you've been putting in. I think just going back, I think one of the issues we had is, we alluded to it already, that when we added all the neighbourhood plans together, it didn't add up to the level of housing that the independent planning inspector wanted. And I feel one of the issues we do have is that obviously councils are elected and the inspector are elected, but the planning inspector isn't, and they're the ones that are setting a number, which is far in excess of what any of our elected councils would want to see. And wherever those additional sites are put forward that were not in the district individual neighbourhood plans, they're all going to be potential sites. I'm really concerned in Grinstead about Morgan Lane and Morgan Farm and Fully Down Road. Equally, as you know, everywhere that there are new cool sites where sites come forward, there are huge opposition groups everywhere. And then I think to myself, well, what could we do as a council? What could we do differently? How can we help resolve these problems? I don't want to see houses built that shouldn't be built, and planning applications go through that will cause more problems in our town. But equally, we all have to obey the planning framework and the rules and regulations. So I guess two of the things that come forward, and we've seen this time and time again, we're seeing now on Farm Road as well, to give another example, with the hospital development, where you get incremental developments along the road over time, and it's 4 houses here and then 10 or 50 and then 30. At what point does that cause enough housing to have been built on the road? Like, it's something that we should be pushing on. I just take on board the points about traffic study and traffic surveys. And so although these sites are allocated in my heart and my mind as a councillor sitting on the town council planning committee, not sitting on the district planning committee, but I would hope that our councillors, all of them, will be looking at every possibility for as the application of what the rules are, whether there is sufficient evidence or there are sufficient planning grounds for example, the traffic stuff, the highway stuff, to be acceptable or not. And if it's not acceptable, then we've got the grounds for turning down the planning application. So I really think, at the end of the day, it's the point. I'm still hoping you agree that there is only so much we can do, but what we can do is just go through those planning rules in detail and make sure we've got valid planning reasons. If we haven't got valid planning reasons, of course, it get thrown out, as you've highlighted before. But if there are issues with the traffic study, if it does need to be published, it hasn't been published, if it does throw things to light, then, and there are grounds for rejecting the planning application, then even if the site's allocated, that's what I would hope will happen to the planning application. And just on the 106 point, I think I hadn't realised how long time ago section 106 monies are allocated. So Hill Place Farm monies were allocated in 2016. I've looked, and they're not due until the first house is completed, and then after that, 50% of the house is completed. So 200,000 goes to all the recreation grounds for improvements to the pitch and changing rooms. I know 100,000 goes to Japanese, other monies go to schools, and then this comes to highlights. But none of that's come in yet, and it was determined 6 years ago. It's frustrating for me, it's frustrating for us all, but money is allocated at the time, and 10 years later, when it comes to, there might not be the same priority as when the money is done. So that's frustration for everyone, but I can assure you, so things money to do get allocated and spent locally. If you've got questions about that, I'll be very happy to try and find out where the funds are going for you. And we need to work more closely to council with our officers to make sure that the monies are being allocated to our highest quality projects to council. But in my final words would be that I don't know. I understand exactly where infrastructure is coming from, and if there are valid reasons for rejecting the plan application, I very much hope that the council to do that.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with the aspirations of infrastructure first. And I wish we could control it more to be able to do that. The one thing I love is the fact that we work with Homes England. We're doing a number of sites in Sussex, which is with Homes England. And why do we love working with them? They put the infrastructure in first. And that's the great thing. The roads for what Councillor Bradley would call the Anstey Southern Crescent, which is generally known as the Burgess Hall. All those roads are currently being built. You know, it's amazing. We already have the plans for the schools, which will be going ahead. It's all going ahead first, and that's because Homes England do, that's the way they work. You can't get a normal developer to do that because he's got to put money up front, but he actually doesn't have it. So he's got to build the houses to get the money. But John's quite right about the timescales of 106, and do you know what it's going to cover in the timescale that it comes forward, which can be 7-8 years. You know, so you're agreeing with somebody the level of infrastructure, which might not be relevant. Yeah.
Councillor Gibson, can we take this on the last question?
In this town, affordability is not really that. We haven't got affordable housing. The average house price to average income ratio is 16. We need more houses. Now you're right, there is a choice in the short term between slightly worse public services and more houses and lower house prices, or fewer houses and slightly better public services. And I am firmly of the belief that the NIMBYs must be turned down, and yes, that is you. The NIMBYs must be turned down, and we must have more housing to get that ratio down. The NIMBYs, these individuals, no, I will, because you're always pointing the finger at developers, you're always having a go at them. If they were in this room, you would definitely point my finger at me. Okay, well, not point my finger at you.
Councillor, you must do be careful not to insult that.
Okay, well, not insult the guests. If developers here, they can certainly be insulted. We've got to have more housing, and it's NIMBYs such as the ones that are sitting here that made these choices that we have to make now, and the infrastructure that we have today, such a problem. If we had lots and lots of development, as the land has said, we would have more infrastructure. But because the NIMBYs has been so effective in stopping large infrastructure development,
I'm sorry, Councillor, I really have to intervene. These people are not NIMBYs, and they're representing a view. And on both sides of planning, there are two views. One is we should be getting the infrastructure in place, which is correct. The other one is we should be building houses for the people who need them. Both sides are correct. It's finding that blend in the middle that is so difficult.
Could I also point out that with our side, that we have actually given alternative places, we're not anti-building, just inappropriate building, and I want to make that very, very clear.
No,
so we're not anti-development, we're anti-development in what we
in your backyard,
no,
about your social job.
I don't even know where it is.
Listen, everybody, this is a very positive issue. As you see, and I thank Councillor Salisbury to come up here and stick his, strings out of the parrot. What I would say is this: we're going to, after we've had this meeting, we're going to have a cup of tea together. Please stick around, have a cup of tea. I think what you said is you live down the
We're in the slither
Felbridge.
of Felbridge, which is in East
My daughter lives there as well. She lives in that. So what I don't feel is that you're alone or the interference. Please have a cup of tea with us. Have a cup of tea with Councillor Salisbury. Let's come to chat after this.
Slightly serious question. Yeah, maybe it is maybe because. Right, okay. Basically, what I want to do, as you know, I always praise Burgess. The work that's being done down there,
4 years ago, I met with the town clerk in the 1990s to understand exactly what the plan was. I think it's fallen away, that you're correct, that the SY6 money is not going to pay for the much needed development of the town centre, which was, as I understand it, the original vision. It's got the infrastructure, it's got the schools, it's got the sports facilities, 9 hectares, was it, we heard the other day? So absolutely, what a fantastic development. Now, please, can the district council stick to that? And can they leave the small scale to the towns and villages? So the towns and villages can do what Crawley Down did, which is work out what it needed. It needed 110 houses. It knew the type of houses that it needed, and it wanted to get on with doing it. But instead of that, the district council has gone all the way down to these small scale sites, 5s, 10s, and that isn't where you should be. You should be at the top level.
I absolutely agree with you on the small sites, because looking at some of those that are in the officer's document, I have questioned them and said, I don't understand why we're talking about major strategic stuff. You've got 5 houses here, how does that fit? It doesn't make any difference to the overall planning requirement. So you're quite right, Councillor. It's something that we should be reflecting through the neighbourhood plan process. The difficulty with the neighbourhood plan process is if you allocate sites in the neighbourhood plan, you do have to keep your plan up to date. Very few parish and town councils are doing that. So what do I mean by that? If you allocate sites and you are trumped by the district's plan, then your sites, they're still relevant, but you'll see other sites coming in on top of it. Because the way neighbourhood plans work, they form part of the development plan. So what is a development plan? It is the district plan plus a neighbourhood plan. However, most neighbourhood plans were made before 2018. There's still 1 or 2 still coming through now. The district plan was made in 2018 in March. So its policies trump any other previous document. And if you ever look at the references to what the district is using as policies, you'll see them refer to something called retained policies. Those are policies which were made years ago, but are still relevant today. And then there'll be the updated policies and so on. If they go over the top of the neighbourhood plan, sorry, but the district plan has priority. Which is why some of the neighbourhood plans just have policies, they don't have allocations. Now they can sit virtually unchanged because those policies will sit there and be retained for as long as the neighbourhood plan is in place. So I understand that it's difficult for us to take that on, but because people say, look, we went to a lot of trouble to do a neighbourhood plan. Now you're putting 100 houses on here. We say yes, but in 2014, you said you would take 8 houses. And that's no longer relevant because we now need to take 100 houses. And that's the difference.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Sofie. Can I have a round of applause for Councillor Sofie?
Yes, I will. I'm not just grateful that the lion's head in that.
It's the most remote issue to do with planning. I know it causes all of us a lot of problems, but do stick around to us. But there may be other questions from members of the public concerning the committees that we talked about earlier that they would like to raise. Is there any? Councillor, former councillor. Thank you. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, Darren. Will the town council now take ownership of that high street founded as requested by the Eastminster Society for a very little cost? And why is it that some of the councillors are against this proposal? Bearing in mind as the investment in Market 2, the ambulance station possibly, the removal of the badgers, and the forthcoming investment in a hall that has no business plan, no end user, and no considered cost for refurbishment, which may contain asbestos. The council will
No, I'll take that, thank you very much. Thank you. As regards counting in the high street, those matters are still under negotiation. Town council it's not against the county being wanted to use. It's how it is managed. Whether the town council's got bear an annual cost which will go on with it. Nothing has been decided. Those negotiations are currently underway. You mentioned St Barnabas. Oh, for the hall, which you know, St Barnabas Church Hall. That's the public domain. Again, negotiations, well, we're looking into that, so we'll steer from the next full council meeting as to whether the town council needs to put in an offer for a community centre in that area that has nothing down there. What we're trying to do is to look at this, and it's purely a council decision, is that for, and I think everyone here will agree, that it's nice to have facilities where groups, youth groups can go, toddler groups, you name it, whatever, even the NTC might want to use it for something for band matches, and those sort of things. So I'm personally very keen to look into having these facilities available for our communities to go, and have someone to go, get the kids off the street. That's where I stand. However, apparently that's not too popular at the moment, but we are looking into that, and it will be discussed and decided at full council on the floor. What's your other question?
I feel like you were attending the meeting and there was a vote that was put down that did support that we would, subject to the outcome of the investigations, would look favourably on taking on counting, but that is obviously subject to understanding the costs, the ongoing maintenance information. So we definitely are against it. As a committee, we are very positively looking towards that, but we've got to consider everything before we can spend the town's money in that way.
My board on some councils that are angry this proposal and bringing away the costs to is that possible considering the spend on tomorrow. The costs are so small. Some councils are
But I think everyone is entitled to their own people. That's what democracy is all about. Councils sit on committees, they may not agree with each other, but at the end of the day, the majority rules. So,
in summary of that, well, there was some objection, but the majority did vote when we were looking at it favourably. So that's kind of where we are, and we will look at it in the best interest of the town.
All I was trying to say is that you're pushing against something you don't accept. It's really considered. Thank you very much. Has anybody else any other questions for the committees or anything like that? In that case, I close this meeting at 7. Well, let's have a cup of tea, shall we?